Alright, welcome back to another entry into this mini ranking series. Today we're going to be ranking the various traits of the NPC teammates, and as you're watching this, I encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know whether you agree or disagree with the rankings. I'll briefly explain each trait before I rank them, but the ranking itself is going to be done in terms of usefulness, specifically how useful they are when trying to get S ranks on Commander mode. Now, let's get started with the kicker trait. The kicker trait enables both the player and all the NPC teammates to kick in doors on the first try. Just one kick, don't have to worry about breaking your leg, it's always going to open the door. Now this is pretty useful in the sense of it saves time, and if you don't break your leg, then you're not going to have to worry about not being able to breach doors in the future. However, if you're playing for the purpose of getting an S rank and you're using your team, chances are you're not going to be kicking open the doors. You're likely going to have somebody that has either a battering ram or a breaching shotgun, or you're going to be using C2 charges to try and demoralize the enemies a little bit. Something of the sort to throw off the suspects and get the upper hand. Just kicking it, well, it's convenient, it's easy, it takes the least amount of time. In the team scenario, you have so many other options you can do that it kind of just becomes obsolete. And for that reasoning, it's going to go straight into the F tier. Up next is going to bring us to Paramedic. So Paramedic is one of the traits that's actually going to stack. So you can have multiple Paramedics and the effect will stack. And so I'm going to attempt to explain this as clearly as possible, but it can be a little bit confusing. So Paramedic allows the change in status from killed in action to hospitalized. So say you have a teammate that has the kicker trait and you're using them, and that teammate gets killed. The paramedic essentially allows that status of killed in action to be changed to hospitalized, which means that they can be used in future missions. You just have to do a short cooldown. What it doesn't do, however, is it doesn't save an S rank. So if you have an officer that gets killed and then they get saved by the paramedic and they're still hospitalized, you're still not going to get an S rank because it doesn't deduct those 10 to 50 points for losing an officer. And the way it works specifically is basically you have 100% save rate per officer per paramedic that you have on the team for up to 3 missions, and then that's going to decrease to 50% chance of being saved after 3 missions. So if you had a team of 4 paramedics, you could have a 100% save rate for 4 officers for 3 missions, and then that would drop to 50% after. But for instance, if you had 4 paramedics and only lost 1 officer per mission, that would be 12 missions you could have 100% save rate on before it would drop to 50%. But because it doesn't save the S rank, it does get there is some use, because say you have somebody that you've been going long enough, you've unlocked their traits, it's useful enough that, you preserve them and you don't lose that, and you can always go back to try and get at the S rank later. So there is some use in that. However, because it doesn't save the S rank, it kind of falls lower than its actual core potential could be. So for that, I'm gonna drop it in B, just because if you've been working with somebody for a while and you're getting their traits leveled up or unlocked and you want to use them, it's useful because it's gonna save those people that you've been working with. But just because it doesn't save the S rank, it could be S rank potential if it did, but because it doesn't, it's gonna be stuck in B. So up next is Breacher. And this is another one that stacks. So if you have 1 officer, it's a 25% increase, and if you have another officer, it's a 75% increase. And it basically is increasing the damage done to civilian and suspect morale when a door is breached. Whether you kick it, use a battering ram, breaching shotgun, C2 charge, doesn't matter. But essentially, when you do that normally, there's a certain deduction to morale that takes place. This increases that, and it makes suspects and civilians more likely to surrender when you do breach a door. However, the more you do in a certain action, so like if you're hitting every door with a battering ram, it decreases the amount of impact done to the morale of civilians and suspects up till the 4th time that you do it, and then it no longer has any effect on morale. Breacher does not negate that effect, unfortunately, so no matter what, you're still going to be having to mix up the breaching method. You can't just stick with one. But up until that point, if you're able to cycle through C2 charges, kicking, battering ram, breaching shotgun, it's going to be a little bit more effective, and there's nothing better than getting a suspect to surrender without even having to fire a shot. But because of how limited it is, it's also going to be getting placed in B. So up next is Intimidator, which will stack twice. The first officer will have it increased by 50%, and a second will have it increased by 100%. And the Intimidator trait increases the chance of surrender upon being seen. And so this applies when the suspects or civilians see you for the first time. Not when they hear you, not when you shout, not when you shoot, not when you breach a door, nothing like that. Only when they see you. And consequently, it only applies to civilians and suspects who are unaware of the police presence. So it's really only effective in the early mission. When you're first going through, you open a door, you see them. But once the majority of suspects and civilians are aware of you being there, it doesn't have an effect at all, and you might as well not bring it. And because of that reason, I'm going to go ahead and drop it in F. Because of maps and missions that have a high number of suspects in a condensed area, like Twisted Nerve, it can make it very useless 30 seconds into the mission, whereas if you had brought a breacher every time you're breaching the door, you're going to have better luck getting suspects to surrender that way. So with that, we're going to leave that in F. Up next, we have the morale officer, who essentially increases the amount of healing stress after arresting civilians and suspects. So, as you play through single player, you'll notice that your team gets a certain amount of stress when you do things like shoot a suspect or play on a certain mission like Elephant, things like that. It's going to increase the stress, and depending on the stress levels, you might not be able to use those teammates for a short period of time if they become too stressed. So perks like this are useful when you want to decrease the overall amount of stress that you have. But if you're going for a non-lethal run, you're already trying to arrest everybody. If you're trying to get an S rank, you need everybody to be arrested. So that's already going to cause, with exception of the maps like Elephant, where there's just an automatic deduction in morale, you're going to be fine stress levels wise, because you're not, unless you abandon the mission or fail to get the S rank, or somebody dies, if you're trying to get the S rank and you're arresting everybody, then you're fine. Your stress levels are not going to be a concern to you. This does stack, though, from 50 all the way up to 150% increase, which will completely heal stress. So I can see its usefulness. So if, like, a mission goes really bad, and then, you know what, you want to go hop on, like, Thank You Come Again, and bring some morale officers extra to heal some of your guys that are more stressed out, it can be useful then. But besides that, I really don't see it being too useful at all. So we're going to go ahead and drop that in C. Up next is Negotiator, and this essentially increases the chance of civilians and suspects surrendering from compliance yells, but it only applies to the first yell of compliance. So anything after that is not going to have the same effect as the first one. And so this stacks. So if you only bring one Negotiator, you get a 25% increase. And if you bring up to the 4, you'll get a max of 60% increase. So that would mean if you had all 4 Negotiators and you yell for compliance, that first roll gets an extra 60% of them surrendering. This is far more useful than the Intimidator perk or trait, just because you can use it throughout the duration of the mission, and every time you're interacting with a suspect or a civilian, you have that chance for them for the first time to be more likely to give up and surrender, which is useful. Unlike the Intimidator, where it's just really the first couple ones when they see you. I place quite a bit of value in the Negotiator because, even if you just have one with you, that extra 25% helps to usually get a suspect or a civilian to surrender, especially suspects, though, with avoiding a fight to begin with, which is nice, because if you can avoid the fight, you avoid a chance of yourself dying and the rest of your team dying, and therefore preserving the ability to still get the S rank. So with that, I'm going to put it in A. It just doesn't get into S because it only applies to the first one. It would be amazing if it applied to each time that you yell for compliance, but that probably would break the game a little bit. So up next is Pacifier. And what this does is it increases the chances of instantly surrendering to less lethal. So that's like your flashbangs, your stinger grenades, your CS-gas grenades, CS-gas rifles, and your beanbag shotgun. This is incredibly useful because every time you hit them, it's going to re-roll this and get their chance of surrendering every time you say hit them with the beanbag shotgun. Or in the CS-gas cloud that it creates, I think it's every half second, it's going to re-roll the chances with that increased bonus from the Pacifier trait. And this is another one that stacks, so you can bring multiple officers. One will bring you 25% increased chances on every roll, and then bringing 4 will bring you up to 60% increased chances. So yeah, with that increased amount, I'm definitely going to put this one up in S, just because it's so useful, because it can re-roll like every half second, as I said, with the S.B.A.G.S, and then with every beanbag. When you're trying to get arrests and things like that, getting suspects to surrender is incredibly useful. Up next is Riot Control, and so this basically increases the duration that suspects are stunned, which basically means they're flinching, they're reacting, they're not able to shoot back. And so it increases it all the way from, with one officer, because it stacks from 1/3 of a second all the way up to 0.8 of a second, or 0.8 seconds of increased duration each time you stun them. So this is pretty useful in Riot Control. When you have a bunch of suspects, you're able to attack the first one and move on to the second one and get that bonus of extra time before they can shoot back, so you can better control the environment. And it applies to all less lethal, so it could be your beanbag, shotgun, CS-gas, flashbang, stun, whatever, just like with the Pacifier. So this is another one that's pretty useful in basically crowd control, riot control, whatever you want to call it. It helps to control the environment, take the heat off you for just a little bit longer. I know 1/3 of a second doesn't sound like much, but when you're in the game, that can be the difference between closing the distance to a suspect or getting to covers before they re-engage you. So with that, we're going to throw that one up in A. Because it doesn't directly affect your ability to get them to surrender and arrest them, it's not as useful as, say, the Pacifier perk, but does do a good job of giving you time to close the distance or time to get to cover, as I said. And because of that, we're sticking it up in A and not S, just because it doesn't directly contribute to getting a faster or a easier arrest. Up next, we have S.B.A.G.S, which decreases the stress gain for the team. So as you make your way through a mission and you do actions like taking down suspects without arresting them, it adds the overall level of stress that's going to be added to your team. And starting at 20%, and if you have up to 55% deduction in that stress gain will be applied at the end of the mission, and it will essentially allow your team to go through and take down more suspects and not deal with as heavy stress repercussions from it. But because we're S ranking, we're not going to be worrying about taking down suspects and stuff like that, so it's not going to be as useful even as the morale officer, because for one, arresting suspects to begin with is going to lower stress levels, and two, if you're trying to arrest everybody, you're not going to be doing too many actions that are going to cause stress. So a 20% decrease is really not going to take off that much, because there's not that much there to begin with. And furthermore, it doesn't have any effect on the mission elephant. So with all that, that's going down in the F. So up next we have Veteran, which this is going to decrease bullet spread and improve accuracy and improve the reaction time of your NPC squad mates to the suspects. So essentially it stacks, so if you have one, it will be 15% decrease in bullet spread and up to 40% increase in reaction time and a decrease in bullet spread. And this is incredibly useful, because if you can land your shots first, say with the beanbag shotgun, if you're doing non-lethal trying to S rank, then you further disable the suspect and roll a chance of them surrendering as well. So this, say, in combination with the Pacifier perk, is a great combination to effectively land your shots as a team and to get suspects to surrender so that they can be arrested. So with that, it's going to go up into A, just because, the reaction time and the accuracy is important, but it doesn't directly affect the morale loss of the suspects as Pacifier does. So very top of A, just not quite into S, because it doesn't directly bring down the morale enough to cause easier arrests. Up next we have Armorer, which allows armor to absorb more damage, which will reduce the overall HP loss after you or your teammates take hits, and it differs based on the equipped armor, so it's going to affect Kevlar, ceramic, and steel plates differently. And it also will include the ballistic face mask and helmets, increasing their protection as well. So essentially what armor does in the game is, if you get hit by a bullet, let's say, and that does 20 damage to your HP, the armor is going to do a certain percentage reduction. And the armorer perk or trait is going to further increase that percentage reduction, which enables you to lose less health each time that you get hit. So because of that, you're essentially able to take more damage, which is incredibly useful not only in S rank playthroughs, but any playthrough where you're going up against basically anybody that's trying to cause harm to you. So it's perfect to be able to, as a team, absorb more damage, and you yourself absorb more damage as well. and because of that, it's going up in S. Anytime you can take more damage, you're going to be more protected, as well as your officers, so you decrease the chances of losing an officer and then losing the S rank. Lastly, we have the Nutritionist. So this basically provides more health for the team, and it's going to stack. So if you have one officer, it will be a 25% health increase, and up to 4, you'll have a 35% increase in overall health. So this paired with the armor is super useful, because when you have your armor further reducing HP loss and a greater amount of HP, you can take a lot more damage and still be good to go and complete the mission without losing anybody. So Judge, who you play as, has lower health than the teammates, so with that 25% increase, they go to 160 HP, up to 215 HP with the 35% increase. And then the team with the 25% increase are going to have 250 HP, up to 337.5 with that 35% increase. So overall, it's incredibly useful because it allows you to essentially just take more damage and get through the mission without having anybody die to the lesser amount of damage they normally would. And because of that, it's going straight up into S. And with that, we have the list completed. But going over and looking, if you're trying to do a commander mode, an S rank, whatever you're trying to do, and you want to know which perks to select for, looking right off this list, my number one recommendation straight away is take a Nutritionist and take an Armorer. You're going to have more health and be able to absorb a lot more, as will your teammates, which is just, nothing's worse than you're trying to get an S rank, you make it 90% the way through the mission, and then one of your teammates does something stupid and they get killed, and then boom, you can't have an S rank anymore. And with the 2 remaining slots, I'd recommend Pacifier and Veteran for that combination of better hits, more accurate hits, better at reaction time, and increased chances of surrender with non-lethal. That combination is going to make it a lot easier to get arrests, and therefore get the S ranks and not have you yourself or your teammates harmed. So yeah, that's the 4 traits I would recommend bringing. Coincidentally, it happens to be the basically top 4 in this list, but plenty of combinations can be made. You might want to do something different. You might think taking an Armorer and a Nutritionist is overkill. You want to lessen that, just take one. That's fine. I encourage you to let me know what you take down in the comments below. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching. I appreciate it, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.